Welcome to our pattern breaking room program for today. Today we are looking at how to set boundaries, but how to set it in a way that guilt does not play a massive role in making the experience very difficult. If you've struggled to set boundaries and guilt has been a big part of the problem, one of the things you would have discovered is a tendency to maybe say no to something or disagree with something, but then feel bad about it for a while. And you may try to use most normal strategies to try and overcome the guilt, but whilst you know logically that you shouldn't be feeling bad for what you're saying no for, but that feeling is still there. That feeling doesn't shift. So today we're going to be looking at some strategies to help shift the feeling of guilt, especially when you know what you're trying to set boundaries for. It's not a bad thing, and when you just know logically that you should be feeling okay. So this is for you if saying no tends to cause you days or feel like a bad person. This is for you if guilt can be so powerful that it stops you from sleeping and you just want to be able to say no without feeling selfish, without feeling bad. So just kind of checking for both of you. I mean, if you're happy to talk in the mic, that's fine. Or if you would prefer to type in response to some of my question, that's fine. So first of all would be, have you both sort of struggled at all with feeling guilty when you're trying to set boundaries? Just type yes, or if you're happy to talk about it, and that will be helpful as well. Okay. Yes, especially with family. Yes. And in terms of trying to kind of deal with the guilt, can you give me suggestions of things you've tried before that maybe some worked to some degree, but maybe some just didn't work? I know sometimes you get books that will just tell you to just try to convince yourself that it's okay, that you're not doing anything bad. I wonder if you've tried any sort of self-help books or trying to remember that saying no when it's necessary, that is not wrong. And when you remember, do you find yourself remembering that it's not wrong? Maybe after saying the no, or do you tend to remember that it's not wrong before the situation itself? So I've had therapy to kind of to try to say no, to learn to say no, but it's still a bit of a struggle. All right, so I see Gillian, you also said yes.
Um, yeah, I came in late, so I missed the first. Sorry for the late anyway, and I missed the first. The trend of thought that you were going on. I think it's about feeling guilty,
Yes.
and yes, I mean, when my children were growing up, and sometimes on Sabbaths, or I may end up cooking or to take things to church, or I might end up cooking just if I'm home and I have nothing I didn't prepare. And when I see them doing such, I try to instill in them, but it is not right. And I feel guilty about that because I should have not done it and show them the right way in the police case. Then would have prevented them from doing that. So that I have bad that guilt.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for sharing that, actually. Yes. So quite often, even if we know what we are trying to set boundaries on is we're still justified for it, it's quite possible to still feel heavily guilty for it. So today we're going to be looking into some psychological principles and some body-based principles to sort of understand what it is about guilt, particularly, that makes it very hard to drop, and what kind of relationship should one be having with guilt, because it's in that kind of relationship with guilt that the ability to deal with it changes, because guilt is a bit of a complex emotion, but the big thing the big point is that it's still an emotion, and the way we manage certain emotions determine how best we are able to sort of cope better with them. So, just for the benefits of those who are going to be joining to later on or watching this later, a little bit about myself. So, my name is Adewale Ademuwa. I'm the founder of StressTherapist.net. I'm a licensed consultant psychotherapist with over 30 years working in mental health fields and supporting people with high functioning depression, trauma, personality disorders, and difficulties with different forms of anxieties and personality issues. So I've worked with over 16,000 people, helping them break free from difficulties and just breaking free from the survival mode with life using my four forces framework. A lot of the principles I teach, they're sort of based on my four forces framework, which at some point I would just get to sharing this with people because it's a very, very powerful framework that just helps you to understand mental health and how our body function and the limitations of our body and how different patterns play out naturally. And because the more you can see those patterns, the easier it starts to be to avoid breaking those patterns. So even what we're going to learn today will be showing one of those forms of patterns. And if you've been with us for some time now, you notice we've been doing these pattern room programs. And my plan is to carry on doing these pattern room programs and running them for free, just to help people learn to understand the psychology that might cause them to get exhausted, the patterns that negatively affect people as they're trying to cope and just cope better and function better. So one of my greatest passions at the moment is I'm doing a lot of work on developing personalized emotional care for people around AI and psychotherapy and neuroscience. And I'm developing some tools that people will be able to kind of use by themselves and as a way of learning to cope better and function better in general. So that's a bit about me. I'm going to move into the work today. And the first part of the work is just looking at why boundaries, especially guilt-related boundaries, are hard to break. Now, I've got a lot of things on this list, but a few ones that I would like us to sort of focus on. First of all, would be to just focus on the nervous system. And the idea is when we are struggling with the ability to say no, the nervous system takes a big part, a big chunk of this experience. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why it feels the hardest. We'll be touching on different parts of the nervous system and how that affects coping with emotions and coping with emotions around saying no. We'll be looking at that in steps as we go through the work today. But first, I'd like to ask people that are here, when you try to deal with your emotions in general, how many people tend to feel maybe a little bit frustrated, maybe a little bit irritated, or upset with yourselves for the emotions you're feeling? If you can relate with that, and that's something you feel sometimes, just kind of type in yes in the yes. Okay, I've seen one. Yes. Any other yeses? So, so it could be frustration. Sometimes it may actually be feeling sad about the emotions you're feeling. I got anyone? Yes. Anybody else can relate with feeling frustrated for feeling sad, or feeling
Yes,
frustrated?
I can relate. Yeah.
Jalen, you can relate to that. See? Okay. Uh, there's a reason why I'm highlighting this, because when we are dealing with emotions, there is a almost like an Inception thing happening. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Inception. And the movie, what happened in Inception is that they kept on going into different layers. So the idea is people can sleep and go into a dream, and in that dream world, things can happen that affects you in the real world. And so they were sort of going into the dream world, and then in the dream world went into another dream world, and so going to layers upon layers. I think maybe if you see the film, it makes sense what I'm describing. But there's this pattern here where the relationship you have with your emotions, it almost forming like a two layers. In other words, there's a first layer and the second layer. And the first layer, let me use a simple emotion to explain this. So let's say I'm just feeling sad, or I'm feeling anxious. I went down the road and I saw a cobra, and I felt anxious about the cobra. So that will be like layer one. Now, if I then start to beat myself up for feeling anxious about the cobra, I get frustrated with myself for feeling anxious about the cobra, that's kind of layer two. And what's happening with layer two is that layer two actually blocks you from being able to deal with layer one. In other words, the cognition and the ability that you have to actually address the layer one anxiety gets blocked, because you are now dealing with the layer two anxiety, which is layer two emotions, which is directed at you. And what a lot of people don't recognize is that when you are in that state with an emotion, any emotion at all, it forms a padlock on that emotional state. And it can actually just keep spiraling and getting intense and getting spiraling and getting intense. And you just keep wondering, but why am I feeling this way? Why can't it stop? But the very reaction that you are having to the emotion is now making the emotion, it's almost like you're pouring fuel up onto the emotion, which is then making the experience harder to manage. Now, just to check where how much of what I said there made sense, can people just give a thumbs up if that made sense? Okay, got some thumbs up. Cool. Great stuff. Yes. So there is this thing that is happening, and it's also now happening with guilt. And if it's happening with guilt, it means that the resources and the cognition that she had to even manage guilt has now been taken away, which means there's a padlock happening, right? So that's the first thing I want us to kind of take in, that there's the nervous system already being sabotaged by the experience, purely by the relationship we are having with the guilt. So that's the first thing. Now, the next thing I would like us to look at as to what's happening is something I call like the invoice. There's a guilt invoice that's going on, which is it's a little bit strange the way this guilt invoice works. But when we think about invoice, naturally, an invoice would be something like maybe I go to the restaurant to buy a meal, and the waiter comes and gives me the invoice. So that's usually how an invoice works. Somebody comes, buys something off you in the restaurants, and you give them the invoice, and they take the invoice from you and they pay you. So usually that's how an invoice works. But the guilt invoice is a weird one in that, imagine this. Imagine you being the waiter, and that's your restaurant, and someone comes in, they come to eat your food, and you bring out the bill, you bring out the invoice to give to them. But actually, what happens is this invoice, you actually give it back to yourself and charge yourself. You're like charging yourself the money. But at the same time, you're feeling bad that you have not met up with the expectation. So it's a weird thing because it's almost like a double barrel coming towards yourself. So first of all is with guilt. The reason guilt exists in the first place is that there's an expectation and there's a sense that you haven't quite matched up to the expectation. Now, the irony here is that the expectation does not necessarily have to be justifiable. It just have to be realistic. It doesn't have to be correct. As long as in your mind you can sense there's an expectation, and then you also sense that whatever it is that you did for the person, it doesn't quite match up to what the expectation is. I know that is a little bit convoluted and complex because of the way guilt works. So I'm going to use some analogies, some examples to sort of try and hone that in. So just imagine. Actually, I'll use one of my clients. So there's this experience with one of my clients. So my client, she had this problem. She wanted to end her relationship, and as she's trying to her best to end her relationship, she's feeling bad about ending her relationship. She knows this relationship is not good for her, and she keeps saying, I know it's not good for me, and I know it's not good for me. But I can see from his face, he doesn't want to end the relationship. He doesn't want to end her. And in her mind, she's feeling he has this expectation. If only he will just accept it. And if he will accept it, I'll find it easier to break up. So in a way, I was kind of asking her, so you're sort of waiting for him to accept the breakup before you can feel comfortable to break up. Now, this may seem completely ridiculous to someone, unless you've been through a position where you struggle with guilt. Is when you struggle with guilt, this kind of experience will make so much sense. Because for her, the pain of knowing something she's doing could cause him so much pain made her feel very bad. And so she would say things like, I know I'm right to make this decision. And in fact, when I went on holiday and I had some 2 days away from him, I was determined to come back and break up. But as soon as I come back and I think about it and I see his face and I see the potential disappointment it's going to have, I just can't. I just struggle to kind of to do it. So there is something going on here. There's an expectation, and there's a belief that something you are doing is not meeting up with the expectation, and therefore causing someone else harm. And in a weird way, it's almost like your body can feel the hurt and the harm that you feel you're causing as well, right? Can I just check if that explanation makes sense? The two explanations make sense, or has it created any questions in anybody's mind? Does that make sense? It's making sense. It's making sense. Has it created any questions at all for anybody? So looking at the diagram I have here, so we have this situation that's just created an expectation, and the idea here though is that the expectation doesn't have to be something that is justifiable. As long as there's an expectation there where you feel that somehow the other person has an expectation that you are not sort of meeting up to, and that already would create almost the same invoice that you are not meeting up to, which unfortunately the invoice is that you're actually making the invoice for yourself, to yourself. So in a way, the brain is measuring this gap without even checking whether that invoice is actually legitimate. And as soon as this all happens, the nervous emotional thing that I explained earlier on fires, and before long you might find yourself apologizing or finding some way to soften the blow you feel the other person is experiencing. And so this is what then reinforces the loop, because you can almost think this whole cycle as a nervous system cycle that is being trained into responding to any situation where there's an expectation that's arriving that you are not quite meeting up to. Okay, so just checking first before I carry on. There any questions at all at this stage? Okay, if there's any questions, you can still feel free to ask the question as we move on. But this is one of the things that then makes guilt even harder. Place guilt in the hand of someone who knows how to manipulate another person, then it's almost like a massive bomb waiting to go off. Because the person who knows how to manipulate this knows that, okay, there's this expectation gap going on there, and all they just have to do is to inflate that expectation even more, and then just make you feel even worse. And so for this particular client I was telling you about, whenever the partner knew that, okay, she's not happy with him, she might suggest breaking up soon, then he starts to look mopey, starts to look sad, which is crushing her. For you, it may be someone telling you, but how can you say no after all I've done for you? Or they may be trying to make you feel guilty by playing the victim. So this kind of makes it really doubly hard. So why am I explaining all of this? First of all, I'm trying to explain this but so that you can start thinking of guilt in a very different way. One is that thinking of guilt as, if I feel bad for myself, if I feel frustrated with myself for feeling guilty when I know I shouldn't be feeling guilty, because it can be very irritating because you know you shouldn't be feeling guilty. Why am I feeling guilty? But if you get frustrated with yourself for feeling that way, you are inadvertently padlocking that emotion in place. So I want to kind of take that in mind as the first important point. We cannot do the beating ourselves up for feeling guilty, because all that does is just cementing that guilt in place. And one of the biggest ways of being able to address this padlock of the guilt is self-compassion. I'll talk about that in a bit. But to also start helping us to reduce the pressure created by the guilt, I want to introduce a strategy which helps us to kind of shrink the invoice, the invoice that guilt creates. And what I mean by shrink, because what's happening here is most cases, whenever a situation that triggers your guilt happens, we've done nothing to prepare for it at all. We've done nothing to work towards it. It's a bit like any hard emotion. So if, let's say, you struggle with a situation that tends to get you really angry, and you're someone who you don't want to get angry anymore, but there's someone in your life that all they just have to do is come and they say something, they just push your button, and before long you've gotten angry. So what would happen with an angry emotion is that people will think, but there's nothing I can do, because the situations come when I don't expect it, and when they come, they catch me off guard, and in split seconds, my emotions are up. So how can I deal with an emotion that I don't know when it's going to happen? A situation I don't know when it's going to happen. Guilt is a little bit like that as well, in that the situations that would then trigger the guilt, you may know that they would come, but you can't quite predict exactly when they will come. And so they catch you in moments that you're totally unaware, unexpected, and because you haven't done anything at all to prepare for it, it's almost like you're just left like a lamb to the slaughter. So one of the first things that we will suggest that people start doing, especially when guilt comes along with boundary setting, is presetting the rule. And how that works is this. Let's say you just started to work with a organization that does shifts, for example, and you want them to all know that there are certain shifts that you don't quite like. And I'm not saying this would work specifically for shifts, but just to help you understand the process I'm describing. So you go to the job maybe the first week, and then you say out loud to a lot of people, I don't work Saturday shifts. I don't like working Saturday shifts. I don't work Saturday shifts. You say it a lot, but really what you're doing is you're presetting a rule so that everybody who's there, they're hearing you saying you don't work Saturday shifts. Now, let's say you have a manager who tends to try and guilt trip people into doing shifts. This manager now sort of knows that, okay, this person doesn't like Saturday shifts. So two things have happened. You've actually prepared yourself to feel a little bit less guilty because you have mentioned it and it's become a rule that you've said a lot. And because you've pre-mentioned it, it doesn't feel so bad to then say no, I can't do it. Now, I say it doesn't feel so bad. It'll still feel bad, but it won't feel as bad as if you hadn't preset the rule. I hope that makes sense. So this, we first start with presetting the rule. Then the goal here is, as you're presetting the rule, you are training them, but you're also training yourself. You're training yourself to be able to just either stick with this same rule, the same line of what is you said you're not going to do, or what you said you won't be able to accommodate. But you're also training them to understand what you won't accommodate as well. And then the last set with this is to avoid negotiating with the guilt. Again, I know it can be hard to do straight off. And again, there's going to be a strategy that we're going to be touching on later on that will make it a lot easier to do. Okay. So, like I said, I just want to touch on this emotional sabotage thing again. So, earlier on, we talked about how your nervous system has this process where this two-level process where if you start to get frustrated with yourself and frustrated with your emotions, it sort of padlocks the emotion in place. So this is a good way of understanding how that emotional system works. Because once you recognize that, okay, this is just something that happens to everybody, it's not just you, then you can start thinking of it, okay, this is a normal process that you just have to manage in a different way. So as we're saying here, in most situations where your emotions go up, your ability to think straight and logical will naturally come down. And in this mode, if you were to get frustrated with yourself, get irritated with yourself, your emotions just go up more. Your logical mind, its ability to focus and deal with things, just come down even more so. This is a biological thing. And why I say it's a biological thing, you can think of your emotional mind as the limbic system in the brain, and the logical mind as a cortex, which deals with our logical thinking and reasoning. So it's a biological thing, and it's as much of a biological thing as your heart that is beating. It's as much of a biological thing as your lungs that is breathing. I know, yes, with our lungs, we can hold our breath. And perhaps maybe we can hold our breath or breathe slowly enough to reduce the rhythm of our hearts. But being biological elements of our body, we don't have full direct control of these things. The only way we can control them, if any, would be to put ourselves in a state that then helps those parts of the body to behave differently. Just like with the breathing, just like with the slow breathing that may slow down the rate of the heart. So the same thing, we want to start thinking, when you start feeling guilty, we want to start learning to apply self-compassion in the guilty mode. I don't know, has anybody ever tried being self-compassionate when they're feeling guilty about something? Let me see if there's anybody saying yes or no to that. Anybody? Try to be self-compassionate when you're feeling guilty about something you're trying to hold a boundary on. Now this can often surprise people, because the self-compassion is a very powerful antidote to unlocking the guilt. So Pat says, what does self-compassion look like? Give examples, please. Okay, so what's interesting with self-compassion is when we're trying to sort of apply it to ourselves, if we're not used to applying it to ourselves, it can feel very alien. But for most people, when I ask them, if you've got a 5-year-old girl that's crying or feeling anxious, would you know how to show that 5-year-old girl compassion? So I'm sure this question to you guys, would you know how to show that 5-year-old girl compassion? She's crying, she's feeling anxious. So Pat says yes. Anybody else? Yes? Any other yeses? You give her a hug. Michelle, can I ask the question? Why would you give her a hug? Let me just ask that, because I agree with you. Yeah, a hug is a good thing, but why a hug? What are you trying to achieve? Sorry, go on.
I've come down to her level to give her a hug, and I'm showing her that I'm here for her. I'm listening. she might not want to talk. She might just need that reassurance that somebody else is there.
True. Thank you very much. Yes, that's very, very, very powerful. Gillian, I see you have your hands raised. Go ahead, Gillian. Your mic is muted.
I would like to know if this is an example of self-compassion.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm feeling guilty. My neighbor cut down half of my tree that was, across on her side without telling me. And I was very annoyed about it. And when she came to discuss it with me afterwards, she started crying, and I went to her home. And but I myself, I was burning, and because I thought, she did this wrong to you, and they knew better, and because they probably just wanted to exercise their rights in terms of boundaries, house boundaries, and so on. That they did then. But I really felt sorry. I didn't shout at her or anything, but you knew that I was not pleased. And I felt sorry about it. And I ended up really cuddling her and giving her a cuddle, and she went beside of mine. So is that in any way linked into what you have been?
Yes, we could say that is a form, that's definitely sort of you being compassionate towards her. So yes, giving the person a hug, helping the person feel comforted, helping the person feel soothed. So self-compassion to me is recognizing the feelings of the situation. Joanne, do you mind elaborating on what you're meaning? Or you could type more if you prefer. So it's saying showing recognition for the feelings of the situation. So you're saying something like whatever the situation is going on for the person, showing that you understand and you care about them. Is that what you're saying there? Okay.
Yes, I found my mic. I couldn't find my mic.
Okay.
Okay, yes, I agree with you that's what would help the two persons or the number of individuals who might be involved in the situation. So you're letting them know that you appreciate what the in the moment, the expression of what you're trying to get across to them.
Yes, definitely. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so all the examples you've given about how to show compassion to someone else, these are also very good examples of how to show oneself compassion. So often what I say to people is, when you're trying to learn to show self-compassion, original compassion to yourself, you think about if someone else was going through this right now, and there was a friend that I understand what they're going through, what would I say to them? How would I treat them? What would I do with them? And then we want to do similar to ourselves. So as an example would be, okay, I just said no to my partner about something that they just keep taking for granted. Maybe they just keep taking my car, and they never ask me, even if I need the car. They just take it and they go for hours. And so I said no, and then they're making me feel bad. Now I'm feeling bad for saying no. Now, to show myself compassion here, I was thinking that, okay, if I had another friend whose partner did the same thing to her, what would I say if she started feeling bad for saying no? What would I do if she started feeling bad for saying no? Now, this can be sometimes tricky, because some people may think, no, tell her how. Why are you feeling bad for? I would really be upset with her for feeling bad. We need to be careful not to just to avoid the critical approach towards doing this, but kind of doing it from a place of care, love, warmth. Because when you do the critical approach, you almost kind of criticizing yourself, which actually makes this whole process worse. I hope that all makes sense. Thanks to all who contributed just now. Right. So we want to apply that compassion because that creates a bit of a unlock to this biological experience with guilt. And if you notice what's happening over the session today, I'm speaking a lot about the biological, the emotional part of this experience, because this is often the bit that people will not spend much time on, and they don't recognize that actually when the guilt starts, no amount of logical reasoning, no amount of rationalizing your way out of feeling guilty is going to work, because there's a biological block here. And this is the bit that most people will miss to start off with. So just kind of reinforce that biological block. And then think of what happens as with babies, because when we are born to this world, there's a need for connection. There's a need to sort of survive. There's a survival need for connection. So baby cries, the baby wants to be held by the mother. And if you're not careful with babies, your baby would want you to carry them constantly all the time. Yeah, it's just the feeling of warmth. And early, if you've been a parent, you just know that you have to sort of learn to sort of help the baby feel comfortable being able to be on their own over time. Otherwise, you could sit in there with the baby all the time. But there's that need for connection that is there, and quite often what happens with anything that triggers guilt is that it's threatening the connection feeling that we have as humans. And in other words, there's a sense that something that I'm doing here is going to sabotage my connections with other people. And that threat can feel very, very intense. Not only can it feel very intense, but it also does something else, in that once guilt gets involved, you are almost feeling the pain that person is feeling. So you can see how on all those levels it's so important to start to recognize that this is a very powerful emotion. So we are doing a few things. Like we said, first of all, we're embracing compassion. Secondly, we employ some grounding strategies. You've heard of the strategies of just kind of taking your time, just stopping, taking your time and breathing. I know they use breathing quite a lot, to the point that it almost becomes a cliche. People often think, not breathing exercises again, not breathing exercises again. But if you've struggled with different and difficult emotions, you recognize that actually learning to just slow your body down and just breathe with your body is a very, very powerful tool to break the intensity of the emotions. Because if you can do anything to sort of break the intensity of the emotions, deal with the need for compassion, then your logical brain can come online properly to support you a bit. Any questions so far on any of the things that we've touched? And if it's all making sense, can I just see some thumbs up? Cool. Great stuff. I just saw Michelle says the old me, lots of alcohol, just to see. I can understand that. Okay, so we have just kind of summarize what we've covered so far. We've said that with guilt, one mistake that people make is that they wait until the situation happens before they do anything. There's no pre-plan to do things to manage guilt. In other words, we're talking about the presets. putting things in place so that whoever it is that you're sort of managing your boundaries with, they already know a sense of what it is that your boundaries are about. That helps you and starts to prepare them as well. Reduces your guilt a little bit, prepares them as well. And then we've also mentioned that there's this need to understand there's an emotional and biological thing going on when guilt is in play. And just trying to manage it only through your logical reasoning, it's going to backfire just because of the way the emotions work. And learning to bring in self-compassion a lot when the guilt is in play is a very powerful tool for beginning to just manage the process of being able to work a little better with guilt. Right. Now, we also then mentioned that there's an invoice. Guilt is almost like there's an expectation that you're having, and it's creating an invoice that you actually pay, you give to yourself. And that invoice is because there's a gap between an expectation someone has on you and what you feel you have given that has not met up to that expectation. And sometimes that expectation, quite often that expectation is not actually rationally true, but just because it's there, and because you may have rationalized it being there as it's something that feels bad, then you feel bad for it. So what we're now saying is, before we start to be logical about guilt in any way, we want to start just reducing the impact of the biological side of the emotion by applying self-compassion, by doing the breathing techniques. There are a lot of other techniques that can be very powerful here. Things like attention training. Don't know if anybody's heard of that. That's quite. But some people call this 5-5-5 technique, where you're going through different of your senses, 5 things I can see, 5 things I can hear, 5 things I can feel. We're using this to ground ourselves to the moment, because the more you ground, the more you can come out of the emotional state. And when you're now coming out of the emotional state, then you can manage the rational side of guilt a lot better. So there's the apology trap. Now, when you're working with guilt, if you find yourself apologizing, this becomes a trap, because like we talked about last session, because last session we talked about the addiction to people pleasing thing. And what we said about the addiction is that when you are triggered with the emotions, when you try to avoid people pleasing, then you find yourself doing things to appease the feeling. One of the things we do to appease will be to apologize to the person. Okay, I'm sorry for having to say no. I hope it's okay. I hope you're fine, right? But what this is doing is it helps us to feel a little bit of relief, and that relief becomes the drug we keep chasing. And the more which we apologize, the more it makes us feel relief, the more we come back to needing more of the relief. So it's important that we start working towards reducing apologies. Now we're going to come to a strategy that then makes all of this a lot easier to work, because whilst I've described a lot of these different things that we need to do, there's a reality is that if you try to do all of it too fast, it's going to overwhelm you and it's going to actually not work. So there's a process we have to follow to do all of this. And that's where this particular strategy comes in. We call it a prediction log. And the idea with the prediction log is this, that anytime I want to do a strategy that is uncomfortable, first of all, I do it in baby steps. If I said no, for example, to somebody, what do I fear would happen? For example, if what I fear would happen is we are going to break up, they're going to fight with me, there's the whole thing is going to go pear shaped, the life will be unlivable. All these predictions that we're making in our mind of what's going to happen when we hold our boundaries properly, those predictions need to be tested in baby steps. In other words, I do something small to test out whether this is going to be as bad as I think it will be. So going back to the apology thing. So let's say my problem has been that I always go back to apologizing. I want to stop apologizing. I'm getting frustrated of apologizing all the time. The idea here is that we want to now train the brain to get comfortable with not apologizing, but in baby steps. And this is where we make the prediction. So we make a prediction and say, okay, the last time this happened, I apologized within maybe 10 minutes of the experience. Okay, what if I wait 15 minutes? What will happen in 15 minutes? I know 15 minutes, 10 minutes to 15 minutes feels very small. In fact, maybe 10 minutes to 12 minutes feels very small. But even if we allowed ourselves to wait just a little bit more, it's doing something to the brain. It's helping the brain recognize that, okay, now I've waited 12 minutes. My worst fears have not come to pass. Then I feel a little bit comfortable waiting 15 minutes. Then I recognize, oh, my worst fears hasn't come to pass. The thing that I thought will happen didn't happen. I wait till another 20 minutes. It didn't happen again. Oh, I now feel comfortable waiting until 30 minutes. So with this prediction log that you start to keep about whatever it is that you're gradually trying to expand your ability to say no without feeling bad about it, the more you doing this practice on all the different strategies that we've highlighted today, whether it is even the compassion, whether it is the whichever the strategies are, the idea here is baby steps, practice, repeated, baby step practice, repeated, eventually makes it become just how you do things. In other words, anybody here has learned to drive after years of driving and then forgotten how to drive, maybe because they didn't drive for a month or two. Most cases, people never struggle with that. You don't just lose that ability to drive. Even if you learn to ride a bicycle, when you practice these things in baby steps and you do it over and over and over again, what you're doing is you're building it into a habitual pattern in your brain that then makes it a lot easier to do. And eventually you find yourself being able to kind of say no without feeling so bad about it. But it has to follow the processes that we have gone through today. So one more point I'd just like to make, and then we'll sort of wrap up today. The idea here is we want to learn how to practice the saying no in a guilt-free way with different groups of people to start off with. You may find that it's harder with family. You may find that it's harder with work, but it's easier with your best friend. Or you may find that it's harder with your best friend and it's easier with work. So the idea here is you start working from places where it's easier. Start put it into practice in places where it's easier, and then gradually start bringing it to places where it's harder. So by these processes, you are gradually embedding the system. By the time it gets to a place where it's harder, it feels a lot easier than, let's say, you started from the harder place. Okay, so I'm hoping that all makes sense. Any questions with any of what I've described so far and the things we've gone through? So I find it harder to practice no for myself. So Joanne, if you don't mind, can you give us maybe a scenario for that where you try to practice no and you're struggling to practice it, and we'll see how we can just talk through these strategies with it.
Oh, you've put me on the spot.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I try to be as simple as I can.
Cool.
I'm an individual who finds it very difficult to say no to people because I don't like to disappoint, and I'm always in to help and always be there for people and putting myself on the back burner. So of late, one of my daughters have encouraged me to say no, just as you've been describing,
Mm.
and I've been trying it. And at first, when I started to try to say no, I used to feel really guilty, you know. And
Yes.
later on, the Lord said to me, "Why do you feel guilty? If you were able to do it, you would never have to say no because you would have been able to do what the person is asking. So the fact that you could say no, you shouldn't feel guilty because you were not in a position to help that person in that time." So that's why I'm laughing to see how you have explained it in this situation regarding relationship.
Yes.
And relationship is not just husband and wife or girlfriend and boyfriend. It's your family and your friends and people whom you are acquainted with around you.
Definitely. Yes.
So yeah, and driving is one of my love. I really love driving, but of late I've not found it so enjoyable because I have experienced road users now. It's not just people who are familiar with the road signs and road guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been driving less for that reason and started traveling by the bus and using my Freedom Pass.
All right. Okay. Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It does. Thank you for contributing. That. So anybody else? Anybody else has any questions at all?
I got my hands up.
Oh, Gillian, sorry, go on.
Yes, I wrote, "Is it necessary to always give reasons or to give reasons when being apologetic?" And I found myself when having to say no, I give reasons why I can't do this. Finding it difficult to say no anyway. I
Okay.
think if I give a reason, then it might be a bit more softer on the person to accept my no.
Okay.
But,
Okay. So given reasons when we apologize, so a few things here. I think it's important to think of it like a continuum. And what I mean by continuum, so let's say you're going to the gym and you're trying to kind of build your muscles. We never go to the gym and start at the toughest weights, at the heaviest weights. We'll build from the easiest and gradually work our way up to the toughest. So in the same way with saying no, some activities of saying no are on the very heavyweight end. Some activities are on the lighter end. And being able to do things to work our way up is the process that we want to follow. So the idea of apologizing after saying no, you can think of it as being on that continuum, somewhere on the continuum. So let's say just saying no and not saying anything at all, a response back, just saying no and just skipping there. Let's say that's on the higher end. Saying no and apologizing would be on the lower end of the continuum.
Right.
So in other words, it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, if we never train to go beyond it, it would be like we've stopped at one weights and never graduated from that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So we would want to think of it like, okay, we will use it as a process of helping us towards being comfortable with some forms of saying no. And I think one of the things we touched on last session was we're talking about how when we learn to swim, if you've never swum before, nobody goes and jumps in the deep end. You would get some armbands and learn to swim in the shallow end. And then when you get comfortable, you must still keep the armbands on, go into the deep end, and then you remove the deep end, the armbands, and then you can be comfortable swimming. So you're saying no with apology is your armbands in a way, yeah. But it encourage you to take a step forward. Then what I would suggest to people would be, let's say, you have to say maybe about 5 no's a week. There's no way to have a consistent amount of no's a week. But let's say you have to say 5 no's a week. So the idea would be, okay, you say 2 of those no's, I would say with apology, and maybe 1 of those no's, I would say without apology. And then the other remaining 2, I would say yes. As I'm trying to train myself to be able to say at least 5 no's a week, right? And then eventually maybe 3 of those no's I would say without apology, and then so in a way we're just going to climb in that ladder, wanting to get to a point where we can say no and not apologize at all. I can see Joanne put the thumbs up, so that kind of makes sense. Any other questions around that? Sorry, Gillian, did that answer your question, Gillian?
Talk about giving reasons, because you can find yourself being apologetic and you didn't always have to give the reasons, and that's a lot to put. Sometimes I've come across my own self being apologetic and giving reasons why I can't do this and I can't do that. And I think sometimes I just need to say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to do this.
Yeah. But did it make sense how giving the reason is on a part of the scale?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So,
Thank you.
did that give you any other questions? Did that call creating any questions?
It's relating to.
For you, did it create any other questions or did it answer your questions? Just checking.
Yeah, to answer my question.
Oh, good. Cool. Anybody else? Any other questions? Cool. So that just tea and coffee. Bye. All right. So that brings us to the end of the program. But just to kind of say, for those of you who may have just joined us for the first time today, so these programs are like our pattern room programs. Why do I call them pattern room programs? One of the things you will notice, the more you get more emotionally intelligent, is that you see that emotions and any kind of emotional problems, they run on patterns. The more you understand the patterns, the more you become an expert at managing them. And so these pattern room programs that we're running is helping people to understand the different patterns that's underneath emotions, the foundations that kind of form the foundations of emotions, and to sort of equip you with better ways of just managing life and coping better. My great hope is for people to get to a space where they can flourish on an emotional level. So if you haven't joined the community, I mean, we have a community, and WhatsApp group community, where I share different things and different points. I'm hoping to develop that even more as time goes on. You can use the QR code on the screen, or just text me your number. I can add you to the community as well. And for those of you who are already in the community, please feel free to ask any questions that you feel you want some support about. And also, if you see anybody ask a question in the community, please feel free to answer if you feel you've got the an experience that could be helpful to that person as well. So I want to thank you all for being a wonderful audience. And if there's no more questions, we can end the session for today, and we meet again, say, at the same time next week. Yep.
Thank you, Roddy.
You're most welcome. Thank you. And
Thank
bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome.
someone asked earlier on for the slides. The video's been recorded. The video will be available, and then I've seen your number. Let me just see. It's Esther, I think. Oh, Deanne. Yes, Deanne Esther. So I don't mind sending you the slides. I can WhatsApp you, message you with the slides, or if you prefer, you can send me an email. I can email you the slides as well. Right. Thank you all. Have a great week.
Hold you. Have a good week. Over.
Okay. Bye.
Back before.
Bye.
Ollie, one question. How many of
Oh.
these have I missed?
Hello. Hi, is that Michelle? Is that
How many have I missed? How many of you?
I think we perhaps done maybe slightly over 8 now.
Oh. Are they recorded?
Yeah, we recorded them.
May I?
So what I usually do then, I just kind of share them. I share the links to them. But if you want, you can. Do I have your number already, Michelle?
You're going to. I've just took a screenshot of that. I'm just about to talk to you now.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. So definitely just send me a number, or in the pattern room. What I'll just do now, if you're already in the pattern room, I'll share all the links to where the videos are.
Right. Is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. I've just sent you a message. I've just told you my name.
Cool.
Have you got it?
Trying to find it if I can see it. No, I haven't seen that. Did you send it? Or did you send it in the?
I sent it to your WhatsApp. Do you end?
Oh, you sent it to my WhatsApp. Okay, all right. So that is just sense of okay. So Jay Watson you send the number in as well. So I'll add you too. Okay, Joanne. All right. So I'll add all those people who've placed their numbers as well. Actually, yes. So I will message you as well, Michelle. Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen your number. Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. All right then. I'll do that now after we finish today, and then and speak to you all again next week. All right, Ben.
Okay.
All right.
See you next week. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.